Hello everyone, just Goran here and welcome back to another Planet Zoo real life inspiration video, and today we are looking at the red kangaroo from the Australia pack. A really awesome animal that I've learned is kinda sold short in terms of habitats. There's a lot of habitats that are basically just a field, and we'll be looking at that. We'll also be looking at the grey kangaroo today because I just wanted to see if there's any more good things out there. So you'll be seeing that after we get through all the red kangaroos. But let's get started right away with some of my favorites, starting with the Zoo of Hannover, where we are entering the Australia area over here, where you right away get a view of this lovely enclosure right here, which has some of that red sand, some of those red walls. As you're approaching the enclosure over here, you can already peek over the walls and see some of that theming, like the water tank right there and the windmill in the background. Very much the standard Australia theming, I guess we can say. There is also some nice signage here telling you that you are in the outback area of the zoo, which I think is pretty funny because this area is literally just two exhibits. It's this one and then the wombat wallaby enclosure next to it. It's definitely a really nice looking habitat though. There is some nice landscaping, there is the theming, the backstage building in the background there as well is pretty nicely themed. I'm a pretty big fan of this one. It's nice, it's still pretty simple, but it gets the job done really nicely and elegantly. Next up we have Zooparc Overloon, which is probably one of my favorite enclosures. Here we are also approaching the outback area of the zoo, and we are passing through a gate because this is a walk-through enclosure, and you can see right over here once again we've got the water tank and the windmill right there with a nice outback sign telling you where you are. It's such a simple thing, but it just gets the point across so well, and it just adds so much to the vibe, to the atmosphere of this Australian enclosure. Across the lake over here you can see there's a lot more space, which is actually closed off from the, well, definitely from the visitors, but also from some of the animals, because across the lake you will find the dromedary camel, which cannot get to the visitor side. They are closed off, but the kangaroos can get into the camel enclosure, so that is all for the kangaroos as well. As you can see, the enclosure goes on for quite a while. It is absolutely massive, which is just absolutely amazing for the animals. You can also see the path itself is a little bit themed. It's got that red earthy color to it as well. Over here on the right you can also see some holes kind of dug by the kangaroos themselves, I'm pretty sure, which they like to lie in and just kind of chill in and chill about. Something that I just really love about the size of this enclosure, just throw that clip in once again, you really can just see them hopping across the entire field at great speeds, which is just so cool to see, and I don't think I've really seen anywhere else. Sometimes they do tend to take a little bit more slowly, but yeah, this is just the magic of the walk-through enclosure, right, that you can get so close up to them. And then here there's a nice little shelter as well, just a little bit extra theming. Definitely the general zoo theming for Australia areas, the rusty stuff and the windmills, but yeah, I know, I like it a lot, it's great. So yeah, that's it for Zooparc Overloon. Then next up we have Pairi Daiza, where we are entering the Australia area right here through this gate. And the first thing we see is this Tasmanian devil enclosure, but what you can also see in the background, yeah, of course in the front we have the Tasmanian devil, but in the back there is a kangaroo standing in the Tasmanian devil enclosure. Is it a mixed enclosure? Is this a walk-through Tasmanian devil enclosure? Not exactly, and we'll see that as we get to the end of this segment of the video, but there is actually a separation there. The kangaroos can get into the Tasmanian devil enclosure, but the Tasmanian devils can't get out. Over here we can see the kangaroos kind of chilling in the back there. There's also emu walking around. This area, however, did get changed since I was here 2 years ago. This little rope fence has been replaced with a more mesh and much more sturdy fence. We can also see over here there is this really cool boardwalk along this grassy field, which just looks absolutely amazing and would be so cool if the kangaroos were lying there. But sadly this also did get changed over the years to make it more blocked off with this little log fence, separating you a little bit more from the kangaroo. Kind of a bummer. It really looked awesome with the way that it was open, but probably there were too many guests walking onto the grass, so they had to close it off like this. Same thing over here. Again, we've got some water towers, we got some windmills, the, the Australia section is complete, and yeah, some other rusty, broken down things. It just all looks really good. I like it so much. And yeah, there is also an aviary over here and some other stuff, but that's not for the kangaroo, of course. They can, however, get all the way to the back here, all the way along. And yeah, here you can see there is a train track going into this enclosure, which we could see already throughout the entire thing. But yeah, the train does pass through this enclosure, so let's cut to that. This is the view you get from the train, and yeah, you pass by the entire enclosure like that, so you get to see all of the stuff in its glory, all of the beautiful planting that they've added to this space, all of these buildings from the background. So from here you can actually, that is actually a shelter for the kangaroo, I suppose. And yeah, here you can see the bridge that we pass over. And over here you can see that separation between the Tasmanian devil enclosure in the back and the kangaroo is here in the front. So there's a little rusty wall that the Tasmanian devils can't climb over, but the kangaroo can easily jump over, right? We also have the emu over here waving us goodbye as we pass through. And that's it for Pairi Daiza. Next up we have Tierpark Hagenbeck in Hamburg, and here we are entering the kangaroo house, which actually has some free roaming birds in this room over here, which also has this nice tree. But yeah, we got some Australian birds, and as we pass this room, we have a view into the indoor area of the red kangaroo over here. So pretty simple indoor enclosure, but definitely gets the job done. It does get a little bit more interesting when we go outside though. I actually quite like this habitat, which is why I pulled it a little bit to the front. Because as we leave the indoor enclosure and go around, we got a really nicely landscaped enclosure with a water moat in front. And yeah, it just looks really nice. I really like the look of this one. It is a lot better than pretty much everything else that's still to come. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. And also, one of my favorite interactions here was this goose scaring away the kangaroo. That was just really funny. But yeah, really nice enclosure from Tierpark Hagenbeck. It actually also goes on for quite a while. It's quite spacious. So yeah, like a lot. But that's it for Hagenbeck. And now we are already kind of getting into the more general kangaroo experience. So here we have another walkthrough. This is from the same company of Zooparc Overloon. We are in Aquazoo Leeuwarden, where we do have a really nice backstage. I love it with the green roof and all the logs. But as you can see, the enclosure is basically just a field. And that is something that we'll keep seeing for most of the coming enclosures. So we got the kangaroo lying in the back. They do share this enclosure with swamp wallaby and Bennett's wallaby as well, which you can see over there. And you might be thinking, okay, we are at Aquazoo. What do the kangaroo actually have to do with Aquazoo? Well, there is actually an answer to that question as we keep walking over here. There is a sign that says, "Be careful for swimming kangaroos," which I was like, okay, that's a funny little joke, but I googled it, and yes, kangaroos do actually swim, so that's something that I learned from the zoo. So at least Aquazoo taught me something relating to water and kangaroos. Something cool in this enclosure as well, which I guess is a unique feature of this kangaroo exhibit, is that there's a raft. There's a raft in the enclosure which you can use to cross this little lake, river thing. So hey, that's pretty special. But yeah, this side of the water, I've never seen the kangaroos on this side, but that already leads us to the end. So that's it for Aquazoo. Moving on to the Zoo of Berlin. Here we've got a pretty nice classical zoo setup with a V-mode looking into a pretty nicely landscaped enclosure, I will say. I love how the cobblestone of the moat has really been overgrown with all the grasses. It actually makes it look really cool. But yeah, this enclosure also goes on for quite a while. It's also a shared enclosure with the emu, as you can see on the sign there. It's definitely connected in the middle there, so the kangaroo can also get over to this side, as you can see. The sides of the enclosure over here are nicely planted. I like that a lot as well. And yeah, just the space of it is nice. But yeah, this is pretty much all there is to say about this one. So we're going to move to the next zoo, which is the Zoo of Chorzów in Poland. And I will say I did a horrible job at recording this enclosure. I recorded a bunch of the emus over here, which also have their backstage building here. So do the red kangaroo, but for some reason I didn't see it necessary to record that one. So this is all the footage I got of this enclosure, but I think it gives a pretty good indication that it's just a fence with a grassy field. Same thing over here for the Zoo of Dortmund. We got a flimsy fence and then a grassy field with a sand pit. And that's actually something I want to point out, because a lot of kangaroo enclosures that I have seen and that we will see in this video all have a nice grassy field and then some sand pits for the kangaroos to lie in, to make a little burrow. Yeah, not really a burrow, but like a pit for them to chill in. So that's something that we'll see in a lot of places, which I guess is kind of a husbandry requirement, maybe. Over here at the Zoo of Heidelberg, we have kind of a walkthrough, kind of not really a walkthrough. As you can see, there is a central space over there, which you can get to from this viewing deck over here. But as you can see, it was closed off. And I think the sign says something like you're only allowed to go into the central area when you're accompanied by an employee. So I'm guessing on busier days, they will have someone standing there to watch over the guests as they come close. Maybe they only do it for feeding presentations. I'm not sure what it is exactly. I was there on a Saturday in the summer, so you'd expect that to be kind of the peak season where you would have something like that there. But I don't know what the situation is exactly. But yeah, in some cases you might be able to get there. You can also walk around the back of the enclosure and see the kangaroos in this area from here. So it's not completely locked away or anything. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the Zoo of Heidelberg. So next up we have Dierenpark Hoenderdaell over here, where there was some construction on this side, which is why this area may or may not be completely final. It's already been over a year since I was here, but the red kangaroo were over here in the back in those enclosures way before the construction was taking place. This was actually a walkthrough for the wallaby, which we can see running around over here. But even back then, I think the kangaroo were separate and not actually part of the walkthrough. You could see them inside of this enclosure over here, which is pretty simple and not all that interesting in my opinion. So yeah, that's it for Hoenderdaell right there. Next up at Monde Sauvage, we don't have a field, we have a lovely birch forest for our kangaroo enclosure. And this one was also shared with the emu, as you can see right there. They're just chilling on the ground, kind of being a bad parent because their nest is right behind them with the eggs completely exposed to the elements, so I'm not sure if that's supposed to happen. But yeah, really sizable enclosure right here. That birch forest is definitely quite spacious, and there's also a more open area over here next to their backstage, where in the afternoon I also saw the kangaroo kind of chilling about right there. So pretty cool habitat, but yeah, basically just a field. And next up at the Zoo of Olomouc, we are once again entering a walkthrough right here. And as you can see, there's also a road here, which is where a little train ride of the train passes through. Really cool here. This is actually a walkthrough emu enclosure as well, which I was very excited about. This was my first time ever being in a walkthrough emu enclosure. I guess maybe Pairi Daiza counts, but the emu never really got very close there. And we can also see some baby emu in the back. Really cute. But this isn't an emu video, this is the kangaroo video. The kangaroo were on the other side of the path here in this larger part of the enclosure, which is a pretty nice looking field. It's got some plants, it's got a lot of detail kind of scattered on the ground with all the little pebbles and stuff. Pretty cool things right there. As we go out of the enclosure, you can see the entrance of the little train ride, which if we just jump into the train ride footage over here, you can see that you don't get really great footage of or great views of this enclosure from the train ride, because it's all the way in the back of the enclosure, right, together with the walkthrough path. You can see there's so much more enclosure on this side, which is where the animals are likely going to be. So the walkthrough is kind of pointless in a way. I mean, I got close to the emu, I guess, but yeah. Next up, we have Opel Zoo, which has a pretty nice field over here with the mesh fence around it. There's a little bit of an elevation, like sloping downness, and we can once again see some sand pits that the kangaroo were chilling in over there, being nice and buff. Yeah, several viewing points through the bushes over here. I like the way that the bushes are kind of trimmed in some areas to allow you to look in. But yeah, we can see some very clear, like, designated sand pits, as well as some organically formed sand pits in this enclosure. Over here at the Zoo of Plackendael, we have a really cool viewing area of the various kangaroo enclosures around here. On the right, we have this enclosure, which may or may not just be for the wallaby. I also feel like Plackendael used to have both the red and the gray kangaroo, but I might be wrong about that. I think nowadays they only have the red one, but again, I could be mistaken. But yeah, on the day that this was recorded, the wallaby were on one side of the enclosure. On the other side, we have the emu and the red kangaroo over here, but there were also some wallaby in the back of this enclosure, so I guess the wallaby can maybe move freely between the two because they're smaller. I don't know, but yeah, it's a nice enclosure. It's pretty nicely decorated, especially the viewing area itself. We've got some nice log back walls. Over here at the Zoo of Plzeň, we've got a cool ant hill, termite mound over here in the middle of the enclosure. It's a nice bit of unconventional Australian theming, I guess you could say. But yeah, the enclosure for the rest of it is kind of just, yeah, I don't know. It didn't really wow me in any particular way with this concrete wall over here. I guess it's nice that there's a bit of elevation stuff trying to hide the backstages in the back, but yeah, I don't know. Over here at the Zoo of Prague, yeah, similar things. We've got a pretty nice bridge walking up to a cool viewing area, but there was a guy sitting there that I didn't want to record, so this is the view that we got. It's very barren, but yeah, I guess it looks nice. It's got some nice views of the city in the background. Yeah, and then over here, Zoo Stežery, which is not a very great zoo. It's a field. that's really it. There is kind of a hidden viewing area inside of those bushes on the left, which I guess is no longer in use because it's completely overgrown, as you can see. Really interesting. Now that was already it for all of the red kangaroo habitats that I've seen, so now we're moving on to some grey kangaroo, and here at Serengeti-park Hodenhagen we can see an Overloon ripoff. Well, probably not a ripoff. I think it's just not a very original idea, I guess. But yeah, oddly enough here, we are in a car safari, but the kangaroo and wallaby are not part of the car safari. It's just an enclosure off the side. But yeah, there is some other like small bits of theming here, but other than that, not much. Over here at Zoo de Maubeuge, there's a pretty nice habitat which kind of slopes down the hill as well, so you got some nice place with the elevation. But there is a lot of mesh around here, kind of breaking up the enclosure in some ways. There are some glass viewing areas, which I guess could either be a blessing or a curse, depending on how much you are bothered by the reflections. But there's also plenty of mesh, so if you're like a photographer, you got some options of getting some better photos through the mesh, probably. You can get pretty up close to get good views of everything. As we continue to walk around the enclosure, we get to some of the backstages, and especially the second backstage building over here is actually accessible to visitors. So here you have a nice glass viewing area into the backstage enclosure where we can see a thirsty kangaroo right there. Up here you can also find another viewing point, which is much less obstructed by all the mesh, as you can kind of peek over it a bit. But yeah, thanks to the second mesh wall in the back there's actually not that much that you're going to see from here, so I don't know. Next up we have Tiergarten Nürnberg, where we have a very nice large enclosure, again with the sand pits. Definitely a thing to keep in mind when you're making your Planet Zoo enclosures. But yeah, it's a very nice field. I feel like that can sum up a lot of these enclosures. I guess a lot of enclosures in general. I don't know, but I just feel like for kangaroos it's even worse somehow, because that's just all they need, I guess. It's just a field and a sand pit, which I guess is pretty convenient. It must be not the most expensive kind of exhibit to make, so that's nice. But yeah, just put in that little bit of extra effort. That would be so cool. Yeah, as you can see, this is also shared with the emu. And that's pretty much all I have to say about this one. And next up we have Dierenpark Zie-ZOO. I'm putting this one a little bit to the front of the grey kangaroos because it has some theming, I guess you could say. As you can see, there is a giant boomerang. I don't know what went wrong in my head there. There's a giant boomerang in the background. That's theming, right? Let's look at that. Look at that giant boomerang. And then some Aboriginal stuff over here. There's also some education about Aboriginal language. That's pretty cute. But yeah, that's it for Zie-ZOO. So over here, Tierpark Berlin. Once again, a nice V-mode, just like we saw at Zoo Berlin, although this one's a bit more naturalistic, none of that cobblestone stuff. But yeah, I guess the trees are kind of creating too much shade for there to be much grass in this enclosure, so it's just one big old sand pit. And then over here at Zoo Krefeld, pretty nice grassy field, lots of plants and things around. But it should be mentioned, especially for this zoo, that there were actually already, when I visited, signs announcing that they were building a new kangaroo area, which I'm guessing might be already finished by now, so this might be very outdated footage. I'm not sure about that. But yeah, I guess I should go back to Krefeld someday to check that out. Now, on top of the red kangaroo, the Zoo of Prague also has a second kangaroo enclosure which houses the grey kangaroo. This one actually being a walkthrough, which I'm entering through the exit over here. But they've got a really cool sluice system where you can only ever open one of the doors at a time, so that avoids the issue of people having both doors open and animals running through. This one is quite a nice enclosure, I will say, thanks to the hill and stuff. You also get a backstage view over here, so you can see what that looks like. It's pretty simple. But yeah, again, here we go through another one of those sluices and get out that way. Then over here at the Zoo of Schwerin, there is a pretty interesting enclosure. I for a second didn't even realize this was a kangaroo enclosure while I was gathering the footage, because there was a horse in the background. There's a Shetland pony over there. I was like, I guess this is the pony exhibit. But no, it's a shared kangaroo pony exhibit. Don't ask me why. It's an interesting mix, I guess. Maybe there's a reason for it. I don't know. But yeah, that is what Schwerin has over here. Over here at the Zoo of Stuttgart, the Wilhelma Zoo, we have a field complete with just a rectangular shape that makes it ever so more uninteresting. But it should be mentioned that Wilhelma is already working on a new kangaroo enclosure. Actually, it is near the Australia area of the zoo, so it will also be a much more logical spot, and it will also feature wombats, so that's pretty cool right there. Over here at the Grüne Zoo Wuppertal, we start off with a backstage view of the kangaroo over here, and then as we are at the viewing point of the cheetah, we can actually get a bit of a bird's eye view of the enclosure right here. Well, not quite bird's eye maybe, but yeah, as you're passing by it, it's a mesh fence around a field-like space. And that's it. Those are all the kangaroo enclosures that I've seen. Hope you got some kangaroo inspiration. There was definitely some nice stuff, especially at the start there. And yeah, I hope more zoos try to add a bit more theming, and maybe some slightly more original theming than just the standard Australian zoo theming. But yeah, until then, just make a field with a sandpit and your kangaroo enclosure will be a-okay.